Quickly, just a little introduction. I'm Harry. I'm a web developer working at EdenSpiekermann. We are an agency doing service design and digital products and services here in Berlin. We have other offices as well, but the Berlin one is the biggest. And we were fortunate to work on some interesting projects, and I'm going to share some insights on one of those. But let me start by welcoming you to the era of excellence. That's something somebody tweeted a couple of weeks ago, and it had quite an impact on me. And the gist of this is that mediocre products just don't cut it anymore when we work in digital. Because if we are building digital products and services, we're not just competing with the local stuff that is around our house. We're competing pretty much with the rest of the world, due to the internet being a global thing. And there's most likely people out there doing smarter stuff than you. And they are most of the time offering it for free. So if you want to build something that lasts and that has an impact, then it's got to be excellent. Otherwise, it won't be noticed. So since I read that, I always look at my work and ask myself, is this excellent, what I'm building? And if it's not, then you got to continue refining it. So that, of course, leads to the question, what is excellence? And there are a couple of indicators that, for me, mark an excellent product. One of those is, of course, performance. We want our stuff to be fast. This is pretty much, the whole talk is pretty much tailored to websites, because I, most of the time, work on websites. But lots of the stuff can also be applied to apps. So we want our stuff to be fast, but have great UX at the same time. We want our stuff to work across several devices. I could show these slides that we all know. The internet was just one screen, and now it's tablets and smartphones and all, but we all know that by now. And we want our stuff to work across browsers, and we want it to be accessible. So not only humans can read it, but or access the content. We also want it to be machine readable for stuff like Pocket or Read It Later services. And of course, people using screen readers and search engines, although that's less of an issue, fortunately. And we want compatibility. So we want our stuff to be compatible with future devices, the stuff like internet in your car or the internet fridge or whatever's coming up. But that's only one side of that whole thing. We also want legacy support for devices that aren't as capable as the stuff we're using. So most of us have fancy Android devices or iPhones or MacBooks, but we cannot just build for these, because that's building stuff for the first world, and there's lots of people with feature phones that have internet access but not as powerful hardware as the stuff that we use. So that's looking at all these things and remembering that we have to fulfill all these criteria. That's pretty tough. That can be terrifying. And even simple projects are increasingly difficult to build, keeping all these things in mind. So we need some powerful tools to make that stuff happen. And foremost, working in the web, that is responsive web design to tackle different screen sizes and testing for features. And then there's HTML5, whatever that means, but there's some powerful APIs in there. And all the stuff that browser vendors are distributing, like WebGL. And then there's GitHub, which might be the single most important thing that happened to software development, where lots of stuff is shared, and you can really take a peek at what others are doing and make use of their knowledge. And sharing knowledge is also very important, because that's in the DNA of the web, right? So the web is about sharing knowledge. You can inspect any website and see how it's built. So we should continue on that. And we have lots of frameworks and preprocessors to make the clumsy languages that make the web a little easier to use. So these are tools we can use to make excellent products. But what is missing for now is the process of building them. So when we look at these projects that we do at an agency, we usually have these four roles in there. We have a client, we have a project manager, we have designers and developers. And if you're a startup and you're building your own stuff, then of course you're your own client, and maybe you don't have a project manager if you're a freelancer. But in most projects we have people who match these roles. And how that usually works is the following. We get a brief from the client, and then we do some visual designs. The designer comes in, does some visual designs, and then developer comes in and does coding, maybe even offset. And then we get somebody to write content, and content is filled in, and then we have a product that we can launch, right? So we launch that, and most of the time that just blows up in our face because it was too waterfallish and it didn't work. So why didn't this work? It didn't work because usually when you start coding a design, then this process of taking it to the real medium that it's going to live in will change your design. That's always the case, and we all know that. Then when you put content in, it usually changes your code as well, because editors or copywriters do fancy stuff with the CMS that you never even thought of. And then usually you have to adapt something like adding lists or tables or stuff like that. And that also changes your design, because you need somebody to make these visual changes happen and not make it look shabby. And the problem of that stuff is, if you're working in a waterfall process, then there isn't a designer left to do this. And what is also happening is that goals change over time. So if you have a long project that takes half a year to finish, then your business goals or what you wanted to achieve with that thing might have changed over the course of these months. So trying to know what you want to build before you build it just is a weird thing. So the point is, this process that I just described breaks down when change occurs. So we need a better process. We need a process that embraces change rather than falling apart when it happens. And at EdenSpiekermann, this process has been Scrum for us. Scrum is an iterative process that works in iterations. And I don't want to explain the whole Scrum thing here, but in a nutshell, it works like the following: you do micro projects basically that take 1 or 2 weeks, and you go in with a planning. You very clearly define the goals that you have for that period of time, and then you go in and you develop and you design and you put content in all at the same time. And when you first start this, it feels kind of tedious, and you have the impression you spend all your time in meetings and talking about stuff but not actually doing, and it can be quite annoying. But after doing this for a while, you realize that kind of magically the product starts to build and it's starting to feel like a real thing. And at the end of each of these sprints, like these mini projects, we have a review where we look back what we built, and we have a retrospective to kind of reflect on how everything went. And then we have the next planning and we do all that cycle again. And the question is, why is this better, or why is this a good approach? Well, it is better because it doesn't force you to know what you want to build before you did it. So in these waterfall processes where somebody writes a book of requirements, they try to or they pretend to know already what the product is going to be before even somebody started working, and that is not how that is a process that doesn't work for digital, because stuff changes all the time. And so in Scrum, you only define very vaguely what you're trying to achieve, and then you start a simple prototype, and it can be ugly. That is one ugly A. And it can be ugly and it can be small. But at least you have a real thing that you can test, and where you can see, okay, I like that aspect, but I don't like the other one. And so next sprint we got to change this, and then you refine it, and then it kind of grows and becomes more beautiful. And then you arrive at something that you didn't know up front you wanted to build, but which is exactly the thing that you need, because you kept on refining it and refining your goals and your objectives over time. And when you reach the final thing, it might not even be so relevant what you planned on when you had the first meeting. Because it doesn't matter anymore. You kept on refining your objectives. And that is all some very dry theory, especially for the morning. But it is very important to understand this iterative process and accepting and even embracing that you're not very clear on how this whole process is going to end and what will come out of it. And now this also sounds like something that might be very hard to apply to an agency context, because we deal with clients that don't want to be involved in the project, that want to give you that starting brief and then be out of the project and come back in a few months. And we're dealing in agencies, some agencies don't even have developers, so it's kind of very hard for them to make this happen. But at EdenSpiekermann, we're very fortunate to be working with Ableton over the course of this year and built the new Ableton.com. I don't know if you have seen it. I guess some of you have. And if you don't know Ableton is a Berlin-based company that does music software and hardware. And Ableton Live is pretty popular among people who create music. And they came to us and asked us to build a new website together with them. And this is where we started. So we're coming to the case study part of this talk. This is where we started. This is the old website. And I'm not putting this up to, I don't know, make fun of it or something. I'm putting it up because I think it's a fine website, actually. It has a very clear navigation and you can find your stuff in that thing. But the problem is that in 2012, or in these years, we want an immersive experience from a website. We don't want something that only shows you, that only gets you to the content. We want people to have an emotional connection to what you have on the web. And the problem with this website was that it didn't showcase the products they have really well. So the content is there, but it could be better presented. So I guess in a waterfallish process, we would now go in and create designs and make it more beautiful. But what we did is we built a prototype. So that is a prototype of the new Ableton website that we did to figure out the information hierarchy and information architecture before actually going into visual design, which is, I mean, this is also the job of a designer. That is mainly the job of a designer, not making it beautiful, and rather figure out what is important. And this prototype, make no mistake, this prototype is huge. This is pretty much the full website in gray boxes. And this was all working code. You could click through that thing, and it was a pain to build. It took weeks to build that thing. But it was so much superior to wireframes or static mockups, because it gives you a sense of what is working, and it kind of verifies that your designs that you envision make sense and that they work in code. And you can also user test this. So you can have people sit in front of that and work through, let them buy something on the shop. Of course, it's all fake. There's no back end. But you can see if the workflows that you have and if the interactions that you have with the website are working. So as a general advice, always try to build a prototype rather than wireframe, because wireframes are tedious to update and they're not the real thing. They're basically just mock-ups, and you don't want to do mock-ups. So from there, something interesting happened, because Ableton has developers on their own. They have mainly backend developers, and they started to build a backend for that prototype, which at the time felt kind of scary to me. It felt like a crazy thought to build a backend for a basically throwaway dummy prototype that would never make its way to production. But in this project, where we really kept iterating on stuff, it was a genius move. I'm not sure if I would recommend it as a general advice, but in this case, it was perfect because it made it possible for us to work in the final system and just replace page by page of this prototype with real code and real style sheets. And that led to some interesting results. This is, of course, once you start replacing the prototype, you need some kind of design. So Sarah Lincoln, the lead designer on this project, gave us these things. This is a Keynote file that shows a panel on one of the product tours across several responsive steps. Like you can see the mobile version on the right, and I guess it's a tablet portrait thing on the left. And we got these, and then we started implementing this. And eventually, after a month of work, it came to this, which is the Ableton website that launched in October, and which was just awarded one of the best responsive websites in 2012 by .NET magazine. That article was published yesterday. You can see that it's very much more graphical than the old website. We have these massive product tours that are completely responsive. All of the website is completely responsive. And this was quite an effort to build. But I think it turned out well. And this video doesn't really do it justice. I think you should look at it in the browser. And we also will have a case study, I think today or on Monday, on the EdenSpiekermann website. So much for the case study. I'm going to skip over this and return to the theory. So now that you've seen that this stuff can actually work, and also in an agency, I'm going to get back to some interesting stuff that happened along the way. So as a general result, we have interaction design, front-end development, and back-end development, and content creation all happening at the same time, which is really the perfect situation. We were meeting with Ableton each and every day. The product owner came to our office, and we had a daily scrum at the start of the day to figure out the tasks that were important, and then we would start building, and then each week we would go to the Ableton office and check back with them and present our work to the CEO and the other stakeholders. So we had each and every week, we had immediate feedback whether what we're building was a good thing or not. And this very close working together between designers, developers, people responsible for the content, people responsible for example, the online shop and the whole Ableton company, this led to some interesting stuff. So designers started coding, which is kind of a theme right now. I think it's established knowledge that designers need, or at least interaction designers who build digital stuff, are better off when they get into coding, and because then you're working with the real stuff and not just with a mock-up. And Scott Severi, who's also here today, wrote a fantastic blog post on that on the EdenSpiekermann blog. It was published a couple of days ago. And I encourage you to read it because he puts it in way better terms than I ever could. But coming back to the Ableton project, Sarah Lincoln, the lead designer, started at, I don't know, 3/4 into the project. She started sending me these messages. OMG, fix the popover thing on the homepages by myself. So that task is now done. That is fantastic. That really, I don't know. I felt. Yeah, it was heartwarming when I read this as a developer. But what also happened is developers made design decisions, and that is something that always happens, but most of the time it's a bad thing. You don't want your developers to make design decisions, and most developers know that. But in our case, where designers were present and we worked very closely together, sometimes even looking at the same screen and just coding stuff and designing stuff right in the browser, it led to very, very high quality results that the developers were in the design process as well. So, and what's interesting regarding the project management is that the team managed itself. So in a traditional project, you would have the project manager as kind of an interface between the client and the team. But in a Scrum process, that really isn't necessary, and the project manager becomes more of a coach for times when something goes wrong, rather than shielding the team from the client. So as a general rule, you want your team to interface with the client because it usually leads to better results. And what is also important is that the client is part of the whole process rather than stepping away and coming back a few months later. Like I explained, that is if the client is really invested in the project and wants this to be a good thing, to become a good thing, then you really want them in it, and you should demand someone from the client side to work with you on that stuff. This might all sound a little abstract for people maybe doing smaller projects as a freelancer or working in a startup where you don't have project managers and big clients. But I think there's lots of stuff to take away from this, which is on a bit of a meta level that we should always work together, because in this digital field that is evolving so quickly and so rapidly, and where stuff is changing each and every day, it's very hard to stay on top of the game. And but if you want to build excellence, if you want to build excellent products, then you got to work together and make use of the knowledge of other people, and also share your knowledge with other people. So the single most important advice that I have to give when building digital projects is don't be afraid to ask. A lot of people perceive asking for help as a sign of weakness, but I think actually it's a sign of strength that you admit you're not able to build something on your own, but you still want to make it happen, and you want to combine your knowledge with that of others in order to build excellent stuff. And in the end, we're all in this mess together, and I'm terrified. Every morning I open my laptop, I'm terrified by the digital ecosystem that is out there. But as long as we combine our skills, we're gonna build cool stuff. And that's it. Thank you.